That would be questions.
Wait for it to say.
We never had a problem like that. So.
It's live.
Is that not the problem?
Yeah. Have we got a mic? At the moment, it's got my
Still
own.
I think it was 75.
Yeah, it's picking up.
It's 78.
Should we say?
Yeah, today instead of
Because I think they decreased the number of maybe people. Yeah, we're live.
maybe.
Should be just that. Oh no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let you fix that.
Right.
How'd you go on?
No tests.
No tests.
Oh, well. Does it work?
Yeah, it does.
No, I meant his blackjack. Never mind.
For those of you who did do the test last week, I guess that's you two and Tom, I think, but I'll be cloning your repos at 7 o'clock sharp. So you've got half an hour to add any last minute bits. That you
But
have.
don't listen to me instead.
Yeah.
It's much more interesting. Except maybe not for you because you've heard it before, but still. Sorry, just give me a second.
Welcome everybody. My name is Tom. I'm one of the hosts for C++ London Uni. My colleagues include Christian and Oliver. There is a few more people who not necessarily are today, but I would like to welcome you really nicely. There's a few donuts which are left, and I encourage you to get them before they disappear. First come, first served basis. Now, a couple of things for starters. So, I'll wait.
Rush for the donuts.
Okay, so the donuts business is done. Thank you very much. Now, a couple of words. First, this is our second edition of the course. We had the first edition started 27 weeks or so.
About 6 months ago.
Yes. And our average turnout was between 10 to 20 people, which was reasonable. We said gigs, that's what you would expect. Now, when we restarted this course, something surprising has happened. We had over 330 submissions for RSVP for this class. So we was like, whoa! Yeah, luckily, well, sorry, wrong. Sadly, the big room upstairs was occupied. The Uncle Sam Spain we don't. So
Uncle Bob.
Priority.
Uncle Bob. Yeah.
Sorry, Uncle. Yeah, Uncle Bob. No disrespect to Uncle Sam. Now, a couple of things. Our website is CPP London Uni. That's the main place of the communication with us. We will try as much as possible to use this site as the place where we will do our classes. But due to things like the place get private booking, we might be kicked out, and we have then alternative places. So please do check our website and RSVP as soon as you can. Go to our website. We have a Slack channel where you can discuss between other students, and follow me on Twitter. My handle you should find on is xxvms. I'll try to put there any links and so on. So these classes are being streamed as well on YouTube, so you can watch them, or you can do it in class. You can ask questions, pretty much the same thing, apart maybe they're not on, you're not physically here. Now we do follow we want to follow the new movement, which is called new growth, which is called Include C++. This is like a code of conduct, trying to be inclusive to everybody. We're trying to accommodate whoever we can. We will be featured in one of the main magazine for disabled people in UK, Living with Disability. Our idea is to basically enable anybody, whatever your background, whether you're rich, poor, whether you're from some kind of minority, you can find place here and hopefully learn C++, and that will have a positive impact on your life. What else? Everybody will need to access the internet, so please do sign up to connect to the Wi-Fi. The SSID is code node, and the password is we love code. No spaces. All lowercase, the password. We love code. Sadly, it's only there on that pillar, so you can have here as well. Anything else? Oh, we will follow obviously Bjorn Strostrup book. Okay. Yeah, and that's it from me. Now I'm passing you to experienced person, which will tell you much more intelligent stuff than I do. Thank you.
Can you see something? Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1. So as Tom was saying, we've been running these sessions for about 6 months. Never quite had a crowd like this, so this is quite exciting. So before we start, I guess, kind of gauge the level of experience in the room, guess where we're coming from. So who has used C++ before? Just put your hand up. Okay, quite a few people. Who has not used C++ but uses another programming language, Java or JavaScript or whatever? Okay, it's quite a few of you. And who has never programmed a computer before in your life? 4 of you. Okay. You guys are really jumping in at the deep end. Okay, can you hear me at the back? I'm sort of shouting. We're going to try and get a mic sorted out, but... are there any free spaces?
Just one question.
Yeah, sorry.
With regards to these sessions, do we have to register for each session, or is it like...
You have to register for each session, yeah.
I'm not seeing the next one on the website yet. Today's and last week.
Okay, sorry. The reason being is if the space is not available here, then they don't book us. Our thing is we try to do our meetings every Tuesday.
The C++ on the uni website, not Skills Matter.
Yeah. The reason being because I'm trying to put 2-3 classes ahead, depending on what's happening. So not because if you speak with one person, the person is intelligent. If you had to communicate with over 300 people, it's very difficult. Yeah. So before people catch up, yes, we had a situation where people start turning up, for example, on this site. When we changed to a different site because this site was not available. So what we're trying to do, I'm trying to put not too many classes ahead, so not to confuse people. Yeah. So then they log on next time, they see, okay, there are classes. So usually I put 1 or 2 classes ahead because this is a new course. We need to see what's going on, how it's happened. Some of the changes happen in the background, which you don't have to know, boring stuff. So I didn't put more classes. But sign up for on CPP London Uni for our benefit. So we know what to expect, and on Skills Matter website, so you can make sure that you have a space here. Yeah, as I say, normally that was not a problem on a previous course. 20 people, fine. Yeah, 320, the big place will be only accommodating us. So as you can see, we have very crowded space now, and that's the biggest room we could get in such a short notice.
Oh. Well, plugging it in there is not going to do any good, is it?
Is that
It's not going to broadcast to...
Is that not?
I was mainly...
I can grab it.
We're trying to get a microphone sorted out so you guys can hear me at the back.
So is it possible that we won't get a space on a subsequent week, even if you've started a course on this first one?
The thing is, we host it for free here, so we don't pay for this space. So when they do have paid events, then they say, well, sorry, we're booked out. So very occasionally they say we can't be hosted on a Tuesday. In the past, we've managed to find alternative places in London. So we'll let you know as soon as we know.
But just we've enrolled now in the class, so we can come every week.
Yes.
We won't be booked. We won't be booked out. So.
Okay. So the way it works is that Skills Matter, who run this thing, they need you to sign up every week so they know expected numbers. So you do have to go every week to their website and
That's fine.
register.
On Tuesday.
I'm sorry.
We have that on Tuesday on
On Tuesdays, yes. Barring emergencies, it'll be on Tuesdays, yes. Right, what are we talking about? C++, yes. So, a few people use C++. Most people, some sort of other language, and a few complete newbies. So about these sessions, we're offering, at the moment, an introduction to C++. So the idea is we're going to do 12 weeks of sort of introductory material. And then for those who want to do it, a bit of an assessment so you can gauge how that's gone. And then we'll do another 12 weeks of slightly more advanced material. And then we'll repeat. So if you find this all too basic, feel free to come along to the advanced ones. Or if you want to do this again, we'll be doing it again in a few months' time. So the way we run these, it's a mixture of me or Ollie standing up here talking, along with exercises and homework exercises as well. We can't turn you into an expert in 12 weeks or even 24. Okay, so have you heard of this theory about it takes 10,000 hours to master something? Yeah? So whatever it is you want to do, play the guitar or learn to surf or whatever it is, it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert, which is roughly 5 years of full-time work. So we've got 2 hours once a week, maybe 50 weeks a year, allowing for a break over Christmas. So that's roughly 100 years if you were just going through these things once a week. So we can't turn you into an expert, I'm afraid. But what we can do is try and give you the tools to help you learn. But it does rely on you doing some work outside these classes as well. And just to illustrate that point, I don't know, you probably can't read this at the back, but this is a famous cartoon. There's a book on the market called Teach Yourself C++ in 21 Days. And if you can't read it, it's a cartoon saying the only way to teach yourself C++ in 21 days is basically to invent a time machine. So, you've probably all seen this on the website when you signed up. We will be using a textbook this time around. This one. So Bjørn Strastrup is the guy who invented C++. This is available on Amazon. Paper copy is about £40. There are ebooks available which are cheaper. If you want to participate in the course, we won't be using it today, but for future sessions, if you could have a copy of that to hand, that would be really helpful. Who's got a copy now? Who came well prepared? Oh, wow. Okay. That's a keen people. Awesome. I've got one. Doesn't actually belong to me, though. That's kind of embarrassing, but still. Okay. More preparatory matters before we get into actual talking about C++. It's feedback. We'd really like to hear from you, to know what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, what you'd like to learn, all of that sort of stuff. The easiest way is to use Slack. Is everybody familiar with Slack? Yeah? Yeah, it's basically a sort of chat room application. There's a CPP Lang channel, which has, I don't know, probably 100 different rooms in it. We have our own, goes by this very snazzy That's user group in the UK named this. That's their naming scheme. We didn't choose it. But we're there, logged on most of the time. Lots of people, both who've done this in the past, and hopefully a lot of you folks are there as well. You do need an invitation. So if you go to this URL, it's got a little box. Just put your email address in. It'll. Oh, excellent. It'll send you an invitation, and then you can join the channel. If you haven't got this, don't worry. It's going to be later on as well, towards the end. And oh, that's the other thing I should mention is we've got a GitHub again. You'll see the URL towards the end. But all these slides are going to be put up on GitHub. Mostly when Laurel reminds me, because I always forget. But he's very good at reminding me. So don't worry if you miss things or if you can't make a session. We record the talks, they go on YouTube. The slides are always available after the talks. So, should be okay. Right. What we're up to today. We're going to have a general introduction to C++. Very basic. What is it? How does it work? Well, slightly how does it work? We're going to look at Hello World, the traditional first program you see in every programming language. And we're going to have a look at exactly what that does, how it does it. We're going to talk about types, what types are in C++. And then we're going to look at declaring functions, defining functions. Does that sound good? Yeah. So today's going to be a slightly different session to the way we do it normally, for the few of you who've come to these regularly, in that it's mostly going to be me talking, just because we want to sort of have a basic introduction to get everyone on the same page. If you're already an experienced programmer, if you use Java or C# or Python or whatever, a lot of today is going to be very easy material for you, right? But like I say, we've got to all start from the same level. So, let's talk about C++, finally. Why C++? You're all here, unless there's somebody who came into the wrong room and is now too embarrassed to move. You're all here because you want to learn C++. Why do you want to learn C++? Or perhaps a better question, why do people use C++? Sorry? Speed. Speed, performance. Because it's fast, right? Or at least the programs written in C++ are generally fast. So what makes it fast? It's got this, what we call direct access to hardware. So it's, you probably already know, it sort of evolved from C, and C is quite a low-level language. Gives you direct access to memory pointers and things like that. All this nasty low-level stuff. That means you can really mess about with what the processor is actually doing. Lets you write really fast code. But you can do that in C, you can do that in Fortran. Why C++? Largely because we have these, what we call zero overhead abstractions. So we have all this nasty low-level pointer stuff that makes it fast. But C++ gives us the tools to write nicer code around that. Code that is easier to use, nicer to use, harder to use incorrectly, safer. And it does this in such a way that when the optimizer gets involved, all that overhead disappears, and your code is absolutely as fast as if you'd written the nasty C code in the first place. And finally, it's fast because it has efficient resource usage. This is particularly I'll get onto what this means in a minute, but modern C++ really advocates this, this idiom called RAII, automatic lifetime management. It means your resources, whatever they are, memory usually, file handles, whatever they may be, they're released as soon as you've finished with them. There's no garbage collector running in the background that stops the world every so often. That's my sales pitch. So where's C++ used? Well, everywhere. So everything from the tiniest little microcontrollers with a couple of kilobytes of memory, embedded systems, right up to the world's most powerful supercomputers. It's actually quite amazing when you think about it. Specifically, heavily used, it's the standard language in the games industry, so pretty much any major console or PC game you've ever played, most mobile games, they'll all be written in C++. Financial trading, perhaps that's why a lot of you are here, you want to go for the money. It's heavily used, high frequency trading and all that. And a lot of desktop software as well, so web browsers. If you're using Chrome or Safari or Firefox or Internet Explorer, those are all millions of lines of C++ code churning away on your laptops right now. So are you convinced? C++ is great, right?
Yeah.
And the silence is deafening, right? Yeah, great. Okay, I guess in fairness, I have to do this one as well. So why don't we write everything in C++? Why do other languages even exist? Anyone give me a downside to C++? Lots of lines to do something. Okay.
It's complicated. It requires more skills compared to, I don't know, Python or some other language which are abstract more.
It's complicated.
Not intuitive.
Not intuitive.
That's not true.
It's compiled.
This is how I summarize that. It's hard. I mean, C++ has this reputation for being hard. Yeah, that's... Have you heard that? So subtle nods in the room. Yeah. This is... I mean, yes, it sort of is. Partly because of this C legacy that's in it. It allows you access to the really low-level facilities. And as we said, it's used in particularly in environments where speed really matters. So people will do everything they can to get the last ounce of speed out of their programs. And sometimes that does involve doing ugly things. And so C++ has this reputation in some quarters as a very ugly language. It also has a lot of features. I mean, C++ is a huge language. Right, so the saying that when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Right, so that's the criticism of Java is that all you've got is object-oriented programming, so everything looks like a class hierarchy. C++ doesn't just give you a hammer, it gives you an entire toolbox. And part of the skill of it, part of the experience that you get, the more you write it, is knowing which is the right tool for the job. But it has a lot of features, and if you want to learn the whole language, it's going to take quite a while. And yes, it's been around for a very long time. There were some things that maybe seemed like a good idea in 1982 that aren't really a good idea anymore. There's some nasty bits in there. The more modern standards try to offer alternative ways of doing things, try to offer nice library types that hide away the horrible underlying business. But it's still there in the language, and backwards compatibility means it's quite hard to change. So this is the main criticism C++ gets, and I can't deny that it's true to some extent, but it's not that hard. There's something like last estimate, 4 million C++ programmers in the world. If they can do it, everyone in this room can do it. Yes, you can. Yes! There's so many worried faces I look up. Can I? Yes, you can. So I was talking about it being old. I'll give you a very, very brief overview, and I'll tell you why after this. So, 1979, this Danish chap, Jan Straustrup, apologies to any Danes in the room, it's probably not how you say it. He was working at a firm called Bell Labs in the United States, which incidentally is where C was invented as well. He started working on a set of extensions to C, some object-oriented extensions based on an old language called Simula. And he called it C with classes. And they released this to the public, and it took off. Lots more features got added that weren't just to do with classes, so they decided they needed a new name. It was named C++. Fast forward to 1990, and the ISO, the International Standards Organization, formed a working group, a committee, to standardize C++ because there were lots of implementations, they diverged in the details, so they wanted to produce a document that said, this is what C++ is. And they continue to do that to this day. So it took them 8 years. But in 1998, they released this document, formally published it, approved it. That defined standard C++. The version of the language that they specified, today we call C++ 98. They also, I haven't put a bullet point, but 2003 there was a minor version, sort of bug fix release. People had noticed bits in the language that weren't quite clear, so there is technically a C++ 2003, but to all intents and purposes it's the same as 98, unless you're a very boring committee member. So now we fast forward again, 2011, and this is where everything changed. Sorry. So there's a really, really major update to the standard that pretty much changed everything, really changed the way that C++ is written. So after 1998, all these other languages started becoming popular. C++ was seen as this kind of dinosaur. And 2011 changed it. It's marked as sort of C++ renaissance. And since then, I mean, that took them quite a while, but since then the committee's been hard at work. So they've decided there are now going to be updates every 3 years. So 2014, 2017, they've released new versions of the standard. Each one with new features, new libraries, that sort of thing. So it's not quite as fast as Java is going these days, but it's a lot faster than it was. And yes, the next one's planned for 2020 and 2023, and so on. So in this course, we're going to focus on C++ 14, mostly because 17 compilers aren't widely available everywhere yet. The next time we do this, next time around, we might have moved to 17, we'll see by then.
In terms of market penetration, how do you see that? If you learn 14, you should be fine.
Yes. Okay, so as far as I know, most companies have moved it to at least 11 now. There are still some that are using 98, but then there are still some companies that are using COBOL. So ignore them. Most people are using 11. Where possible, they're moving to more recent versions. If you learn 14, you're going to learn everything about 11 anyway. So if you do happen to get a job somewhere and they say, no, we use C++ 11, you'll sort of sigh and go, okay, well, using that was a nice feature, but I know how to work around it. So modern C++. Has anyone, you heard the term modern C++ used? No?
Yes.
Yes, well, you don't count, Tom.
Sorry.
Modern C++ is well, a phrase that gets used a lot and no one can precisely define it because it tends to be a moving target. So there was a book published called Modern C++ Design that was published in the year 2000. So, but when we talk about modern C++ today, most people mean C++ 11. This was the major turning point. So don't bother learning C++ 98. It's as much use as learning COBOL or something.
Are you going to go through how to determine which installation, which version we have installed?
So if you download any compiler today, you'll get at least 14, probably with quite a few 17 features.
How do I determine that? If I want to look at which version?
It depends on the individual compiler. But we're just going to be using an online compiler today. Next week, we're going to go through and do a sort of install fest. But I thought if we do that today with how many 50 odd people in the room, we'll never get anything done. So yeah, make sure any textbooks. So this book covers C++ 14. But if you use any other textbooks or any online resources, there is, can I say this? There's a load of crap online, like really old tutorials from like 20 years ago. So just kind of look at the revision dates, make sure it's up to date. If you can, get an opinion from an expert or someone more knowledgeable. The Slack is a great place to do that. Just say, hey, I found this online, what do you think of it? And they will be able to tell you within probably a few seconds of looking at it whether it's any good. So that's the about C++ bit. Any questions?
I noticed the book was up to the 4th edition. Is that still?
Yeah, I think it's second edition.
This is the second edition. So
There is no third.
The 4th, so
Oh, he has several books. So the C++ programming language is the one that's up to the 4th edition.
okay.
This one is the second edition.
So go back. We're specifically using the 2nd edition.
No. So there are only 2 editions of this book. Make sure you got
Got the
principles
wrong
of yeah.
Okay.
The C++ programming language is it's not aimed at beginners. It's much harder going. So yeah, incidentally, Dr. Straustrup, he actually taught at Texas University, taught programming to 18-year-old, freshman college students, as they call them in the States, using this book. So that's why one of the reasons we decided to go with it. Okay. Does everybody have a laptop? Oh, let me ask a better question. Does anybody not have a laptop? Okay, are you sitting next to somebody who does? Excellent. So you can look over their shoulder while they do this, while we write our first C++ program. There are no prizes for guessing what this program does, by the way. Well, perhaps I should have kept the donuts down as a prize.
If somebody got a problem, yes.
Yeah, so
lift your hands and somebody will try to get to you and give you a hand.
So if you go to one box, you should just see a big text box. It'll have some, I think it might even have Hello World in there by default. But just delete it and enter that. So so that we're all doing the same thing.
It's not working. Google does. Try onebox.com.
Oh, is it .com?
Yes.
No,
No, it's
no,
not.
it doesn't. Oh, it might need www.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
What Wi-Fi? The code node wrong.
Has anybody else got a problem actually getting to the loading up the web page?
I think give it a shot. Might be connected to it. So.
Oh,
You can try REPL.it.
sorry.
REPL.it is an alternative. You need a big environment to do that.
Oh, okay.
Loads for me.
That doesn't quite right. I think it's everybody's using it simultaneously. All right.
It is working. I don't know why.
It's supposed to print the zero.
Yes. Well, it's supposed to. Yeah. Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay. Let's now go.
I'm going to cover it, don't worry.
So apparently, if you can't get to it, type in https:// in front.
Oh, okay, so no redirect. There were some spare chairs somewhere. Oh, hi.
Yeah. We've got lots of maybe it's been difficult it's too late.
Oh wow, they've updated it. To be honest, any of them will be absolutely fine.
Okay.
So 2A is the absolute leading edge new stuff that's not saved yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work, we can
Yes, that's why it's 2A. Yeah,
if something didn't compile.
but I mean this is such a.
Yes, trivial.
But if you were using the absolute leading edge feature.
Got one look about.
Yes, and then somewhere on the bottom there should be. Okay, so if you just select it as semicolon,
If anybody got a problem, just raise your hand.
Yeah, feel free to raise your hands.
Can I ask, what should the output be? What should we actually see on the screen?
Hello world.
You should say hello world.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about that.
So that means you didn't change the information in the column. Semicolon? No. Quotes. In the quotes, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry?
So in some of they say hello wandbox.
Huh?
It says hello wandbox.
Yeah, so it's got a default Hello World program in there already if you've never been to the website. Otherwise it remembers the last program you typed in, which for me was something completely different. So I actually forgot that it's got Hello World in there. Yeah, so I'll put a PDF on GitHub, and Tom will put an email around your website.
Okay, while we have people are working, I'll just remind us because lots of questions coming from the same angle of admin type. So I'll overtake from Tristan for a second. Go to our website, cpplondonuni.com, and you will find there all the latest information. Yes, so if you go to our website, I'm putting there a blog which describes all the ins and outs, what's going on. You'll find the next class information and where the class takes place. The reason is why we don't put like a lot of classes in one batch, because we don't always get space here in Skills Matters. We would love to, but we don't. We're not paying, so it's a free event. So the people who pay, who rent the space, they got priority and they might kick us out. In that case, as much as we can, we're trying to organize alternative space. Yeah. So far, we managed to do not far 2 minutes walk from here in City Point building, but we might go to different places as well because some other people suggested we can use the space. So watch our website. Now, if you want to make sure that you get into the Skills Matter, yes, to this place, RSVP on their website, because of the GDPR, yes, there is no an easy way of us putting the information to them and then putting information. It's a bit of mess, yes, until we don't figure out some, solution that will be acceptable by GDPR and everybody else. There is a little bit of mess. So go to our website, check in, go to Skills Matters, book in, follow me on the Twitter. My handle is xxvms, and I try to update all the information which you might find useful. Obviously, any questions, ask on the Slack, send me an email to Tristan, to Ollie, and we'll do our best to answer. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay. Have we got this saying the expected thing, or does anyone need more time? Does everyone put your hand up if you're done?
Hey.
That's everybody, as far as I can see. Okay. So let's have a look at what we're actually doing. Go through it line by line. There are only, 6 lines, so don't worry. First of all, anybody tell me, what does this line do? It's a comment, absolutely, of course it is. So there are 2 ways of writing comments in C++. Won't be a surprise to anyone who's used any of the what are called curly brace languages. So you can write an inline comment by starting a line with 2 slashes, or you can write a multi-line comment by starting with /*, writing all your text, and ending with */. The only tricky thing is you can't nest these */. You can in some other languages, Swift and C# allow it, but you can't in C++. But otherwise it's the same as JavaScript or most other languages you've used probably. Okay. Line 2. What does this one do?
Equals of that software to be used in my program.
Input out.
Yeah?
I guess it will allow in our software to use a bunch of methods from the outside.
Perfect. So this thing called Iostream is defined as part of this C++ standard library. So that's a load of code, useful code that comes with the compiler, is available everywhere. One of these bits of code is called Iostream. And this hash include thing is the way we tell the compiler that we want to include this code in our program. We won't today get into the specifics of exactly what hash include does. We will probably, session after next, really dive deeply into it. But at the moment, what we'll say is this lets us use the facilities in this Iostream library. So, yes, Iostream lets us read and write to the console, the terminal. So if anyone's used C, you do include .io.h. Iostream is sort of the C++ version of that. So this include mechanism, I said we weren't going to talk more about it. You get one line about it. It's used to break your software up into small, manageable bits to include code from other libraries. So in Python, you might use import or Java or whatever. The C++ method at the moment is hash include. Everybody happy? Yeah.
Sorry, we always start with hash include Iostream. I mean, if that command allowed you to write in the console, to the console,
yeah.
So we always have to write to the console. So we always start like that.
For the first few classes, you will. But if you were writing, graphical software, then you might not need to. Or if you're writing just code for another library that just has functions that don't do any output, then that file wouldn't need to include this.
In other languages, you often find the console quite a useful debugging tool.
Yes.
Do you need to include Iostream just for debugging, or are there other methods of debugging without using Iostream?
If you want to write to the console using this, then you have to include the header. So C++ builds on C, so the C facilities, the C standard library is still there. So if you wanted to, you could do the same thing you do in C. You could include standard io.h, and you could call printf. But one way or the other, if you want to output to the console, you're going to have to tell it how you want to do that.
Right, so you probably include it in most compilations while you're programming, and then remove it for production.
That would be yeah, one way of doing it. Yes, definitely. So let's move on. Int Main, open close brackets. Who can tell me what this does?
It's the core of our program, and it's supposed to return an integer.
Okay.
Which should be 0 if everything goes well.
You've done this before.
I wanted to gratify your teaching skills.
Well, thank you. You've done this before as well, man.
Well, the other people are real for a reason.
So what are you going to say? Sorry.
Declare a function.
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear. This declares a function. Declares a function called main, which returns an int and takes no parameters. In fact, that's exactly what I wrote on that line. There we are. So main is a very special function because it's where execution of our program starts. So every C++ program contains a main function, contains only one main function, and execution of our program begins at the beginning of main, and when we reach the end of main, the program finishes. Or perhaps better to say, when we exit main, the program finishes. So in Java, you do something, it'd be a static class method. In C++, it's just a function. It doesn't belong to a class. It can't belong to a class.
Sorry, why has to be integer?
I'll tell you that in just a moment.
I didn't do the course.
Sorry? No. These are good questions. anticipated them, but put them in the wrong order. You're getting just a little bit ahead of me, but that's great. But I will come to that in a moment. So as I say, main is a bit special. It has some special rules. One of those rules is it must return an int. So if you see a tutorial that says void main, a C++ tutorial that says void main, run away because they're wrong, right? And it's a great sign to show that they don't know what they're doing if they say void main. So what's the next line? Open brace. Yes. This is important. It's the reason I put it on a line by itself. A curly brace opens a block. In this case, the block is the definition of the function. So in C and in C++, you have declarations and you have definitions. And you can declare a function as many times as you like, but there can only ever be one definition. Blocks are also useful for another reason, is because in C++, blocks control variable lifetimes. And that turns out to be very, very important. We'll cover it again in a minute. So now we have this one. Now we have the meat of it. std : cout arrow arrow quote hello world /n quote semicolon. I'm not going to be able to cover this in 3 bullet points. Let's break it down. std : cout. This is a special magic object defined in the standard library. And that's what this std prefix means. So in C++, code is broken down into what are called namespaces. And namespaces are a facility so that you can write nice, friendly names. You don't have to write a horrible prefix to stop it clashing, because the namespace will stop it clashing with another person's code over there. So all the standard library facilities are in this namespace std. So we say we want this object called cout in the namespace std. And we say in that namespace by doing this double colon. So in Java or C# or Python, you'd use a dot. In C++, for arcane reasons, we use a double colon instead. So cout in the standard namespace.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
You didn't get it? Which bit didn't you get?
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
I mean, from the beginning of this.
Okay, so in that
std is the standard.
std means standard, yes.
Out is the output, and C.
Yeah, so cout console output.
Out. And the comma, the two.
And this double colon says we want the object named cout, which is in this namespace.
Okay.
Which belongs to this library of code.
What is a namespace? What is a namespace, right? What is a namespace? Tell me.
Is the name of a space in the memory?
No. Do you want to tell them? All right. So a namespace is basically an organizational concept. So within C++, you know, some other person might happen to name their function, one of their functions or more, with the same name as yours. So we organize things into what are called namespaces in order to ensure that if someone makes a function called, say, add, if they behave well and they just put it in a namespace, you too can define a function called add and put it in your namespace. It's just a way of organizing code together. The std one is a little bit special because you are not allowed to stick your own stuff in that particular namespace. And a namespace is just a declaration, essentially. Namespace, whatever I want to call it, some curly braces, and then what you want. Go ahead.
What if two people have called the namespace the same thing?
Then you're going to get clashes.
Well, effectively they would be merged together, but if anything within that namespace is actually the same, then it's either going to generate an error at compile time or possibly leak time when it's putting together the compiled files.
So should all this code be wrapped in a namespace?
Main is special because it can't go in a namespace.
Okay.
but like I said, there can only ever be one main function in a program. But generally, yes, whenever you write your own code, you want to put it in your own namespace.
Okay, so you start off the program and then it references namespaces below the main big function at the top.
The other way around. You have your code first, and then your main probably go to the bottom.
So basically, we call our namespace hello world. So
You could call your namespace hello world. I mean, because you end up typing them frequently, people prefer to go for short names. There is a way. There is a way to avoid having to type this. You probably saw it when you first went to OneBox. You can say using namespace whatever. It's best avoided for reasons of avoiding name clashes, basically. Particularly if you go using namespace standard. The standard namespace has a ton of stuff in it, and it can quite restrict the names you can choose because they've nicked all the good ones, right? So if you use using namespace standard, it restricts your choice of names. Whereas if you explicitly write std : then you're not going to clash with any of the standard library things.
In terms of compiling or whatever, does it make a difference?
Does it make a difference?
To declare user namespace std?
It'll, as long as it might lead to name clashes, right? So
Clashes, I get, in terms of time or performance.
no, not in terms of time or performance. No, it's purely an organizational thing. Yeah, sorry.
If we want to show any text, so we're gonna use this or every time, or there are no.
This is pretty much the way we will. Yeah, it's a bit ugly, but this is the way to do it in C++ at the moment. Yeah.
So what's the distinction between a namespace and the sort of library that we sort of did the Iostream?
Okay, so that's a good question. So a header will declare things within a namespace, right? So they're similar but not the same thing. So in a lot of languages, they're one and the same, right? So in Python, you import a module, and then you access things in that module by writing the module name dot something. I don't know if Python, I didn't catch which hand you put up, but most languages works like that. C++, these are two distinct concepts. So we have the thing you can sort of think of as a module name, which was Iostream, but its namespace is std. And yes, typing std whatever is awkward at Google. In Google it works. Yeah.
If you had a bunch of things in std that you wanted to include,
yeah,
could you just do include std?
Include is to access that code, right? To make that code available in your program. If you wanted to just use a particular name, there is a way to do that, yes. But we won't cover it right now. All the questions, yeah.
Oh, it's just like console log.
I'm sorry.
It's just a more complicated console log, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. All this does is, so other languages it's called print or printf or println. That's what this whole line does. It just does it in a complicated way. There is a library that makes it much nicer, but it's not part of the standard library. It's not available on OneBox, so that's why we're not using it today. But in future sessions, I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you how to get to it, and then we won't have to do this horrible business anymore. Yeah.
Just to clarify, does std belong to the library Iostream? And you need to include that in order for that. I know it might seem a bit kind of redundant because obviously you need to kind of input and output stuff, but just to access std.
Iostream is part of the standard library. So everything in the standard library has this std prefix. And one of the bits of it, one of the modules in there is called Iostream.
Okay.
There are others, so there's string, if you want to use strings, std string, we'll see soon. There's, if you want to use the array types, there's include vector. These all give you access to parts of the standard library.
In the window, when you loaded this screen, it actually had an include for cstdlib. If you include that is
the std namespace and everything in that namespace?
No. So cstdlib is actually part of the C standard library. That's what the C prefix means there. So the C standard defines this header called stdlib.h that I can't even remember what's in there, but it's part of C.
Yeah, so the STD section, that comes preloaded. You don't need it. I'm just trying to get the right way around. The Iostream is part of the STD, or the STD is part
So
of
let's use some slightly different terms. So we have the standard library, right? And that's a ton of code that comes with your compiler. Okay? Everything in the standard library has this std prefix. It lives in the std namespace. Okay? Now because it's really big, they didn't just have a hash include all of the standard library. Because it's really big, and you usually don't want all the things, and it'll slow down the compiler. So they broke it down into lots of separate little, what are called headers. You can think of them as modules if you like. One of which is Iostream. And Iostream was the only one we needed for this program. But in a real program, you might have maybe a couple of dozen of these include statements.
There is, there is an address of APA about the standard library.
Yes. So right at the end, I've got a whole load of reference materials. And of course, the book covers much of the standard library in quite a lot of detail.
So if you want to include other modules in the library, we're going to include it before a main in the same way.
Before main, yes.
I mean, if the program starts with main, why include everything?
You keep asking really good questions that I'm going to talk about later. So,
Okay, see you later.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah. So that was just this bit. We've got the rest of the line to worry about now. This funny double chevron thing, double arrow. This is, technically, it's called the bit shift operator. But let's call it double arrow. So in this case, what it means is pass this thing to this object. It's acting as a streaming operator. So this thing is an example of an output stream. This is a console out. You can have file output streams or other kinds of output streams. In this case, we're streaming to the console. And what we're saying is, stream this thing to this output. And this is an example of what's called operator overloading. So this is a special type. Like I say, it's a kind of output stream. And C++ allows us to redefine what various operators mean. So an operator is something like plus or minus or times, or in this case, it's double arrow, bit shift. You can, if you have a custom type, you can decide what those symbols mean for that type. It's called operator overloading. Some languages offer this, some don't. C++ does, and this is a prime example. So we'll see some other meanings of this double arrow, and we'll see how to overload operators for our own types in a few weeks' time. But for now, you can just think of it as passing this to that object.
Are you saying that that is at the moment using this operator overloading?
It is operator overloading, yes. Yes. So this is a really common use of operator overloading. And finally, the easy bits, hopefully. This is a string literal. So to write strings in C++, you put them in double quotes. To write a single character, you put them in single quotes. Okay, so some languages let you do one or the other. In C++, they're different. So string, multiple characters, double quotes, character, single quotes. Does anyone tell me what the /n at the end does? It's a new line, yeah, absolutely. So this is a special, what's called an escape code. It's a special value that says, please insert a new line here. So if I wanted to, I could have put some more text over here, and it would have printed it out on 2 lines. There is an alternative way of starting a new line. It's using this thing, endl, which sometimes you'll see it with the std prefix. That's really commonly used in simple examples. Probably the hello world that you deleted did that. It's usually better to not do that because it actually has a bit of overhead compared to just doing a /n. But it's so common, I thought I'd mention it here just in case you come across it and wonder what it does. It just ends the current line, doesn't just end the current line.
Flushes the string.
Yeah.
And the brackets are not, you don't put the brackets around the std.
Oh no, that's what I mean. Is sometimes you'll see it, sometimes you'll just see that, and sometimes you'll see it with that.
But where will you see it? That, like after that command, or?
Yeah. So what they will do is sometimes you put another 2 arrows, and then you do this std endl thing there.
Like yeah.
So probably the default program I think did that. But it's generally a better idea to just use /ns when you want a new line. But that's not quite the end. We have a semicolon as well. Can't neglect that. Every statement in C++ ends with a semicolon. They're not optional, as they are in some languages. You need to have it. If you don't, the compiler will yell at you. Sometimes it will yell at you politely. It will say, I was expecting a semicolon here. And sometimes it will just go on and try and process the rest of the code and get in a complete muddle and throw you a horrible error that kind of makes no sense. So if that happens, just very first thing to do is to go back and check and make sure every line ends with a semicolon. Right? It's like putting a full stop at the end of a sentence, right? Compilers are getting a lot better. They do generally give you quite nice error messages these days, but once in a while you can really confuse it. Oh. It's thirsty work, this yelling business. We're nearly at the last line now. Return 0. So what does this do? Yeah, it's the return value of the function. So the return keyword tells the program to leave the current function and pass this value to whoever called this function, to whoever ran this function. Now main's a bit special, because who calls the main function? This is where your program begins. Right, so who are we giving this 0 value to? Not quite. We're actually returning this 0 value to the operating system. So when you run a program, it gives you back what's called a return code. And for main, that's why main has to return an int, because the operating system expects you to give it a number back. And that number is used to tell it, did this program run successfully or not? So main is a bit special. If you return the value 0, you're telling the operating system, this program ran correctly, did what it's supposed to do. And if you use Mac or Linux, there's a Unix command that will tell you the return value of the last program. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But
double question mark, I think.
Yeah. So by convention, if you return 0, you're saying from main, you're saying you're telling the operating system this program worked. If you return something else, you return 1. If you return 110, you're saying this program didn't work. We had a problem.
Also worth mentioning probably is that in most cases you can only access the lowest 8 bits of it. So if you return a huge number.
And the number at the end actually is funny with the 0, because we're returning int to main.
Yeah.
But the 0 actually it's not int. It's
yeah,
octo.
it is.
It's octo number.
Yeah, it's an int.
They're the same, but apparently there is a problem using 0.
It's not a problem. It's an integer literal.
Yeah.
Right. So we return the value 0 because the program ran okay. Now, oh, sorry.
I actually did before a mistake and I put O instead of 0. And it told me like mistake, so why didn't like return the O?
She put it just O
Yeah.
without double quotes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So O is not an integer. So this is a 0, not the letter O. Yeah.
I think she wanted to understand why the error, because O was not at the
Yeah,
kernel
exactly.
or a string.
I was wondering why it sent, why it returned 0, but why it didn't return O.
Okay, because if you just use the letter O, the compiler thinks that's the name of something. Do you have a function called O, or do you have a variable called O? And it will probably have said to you, I don't recognize this name, or something like that.
I put another number down.
Yeah.
And it still ran, and it printed hello world.
Yes. Yeah. So this is kind of for your program to return information to the operating system. Okay, so it's still going to do all the things it did, and then at the end, you can return whatever number you like. So, for example, a lot of test suites, so libraries that you use for testing, will return 0 if all the tests went okay, and they'll return a different value if some of the tests were wrong. And so you can write shell scripts that look at this return value, and if it's 0, they know everything's okay. If it's 1, then they'll fire off an email to tell you this commit broke the test.
So main is always integer.
Main always returns an int, yes.
Okay.
But main, there's another reason it's special, is because it's the only function that if you don't put this line, if you delete the line return 0, it will behave as if you had written return 0 at the bottom. So, I don't know why, it's the only function in C++ that does it. If you try it with any other function, it's an error, but with main, you can omit this return 0.
Not an error.
I don't get even a warning.
Sorry?
I don't get even a warning if I make a return 0.
Not in main, no. If you're allowed to omit this line, only for main. Yeah, it's part of the standards, yeah.
It's not an error, it's UB.
It's an error in your program. We've got one last little line. This closes the block that we started just after the function declaration. When we close a block, when we leave a block, local variables that are defined in that block get destroyed. And this is an extremely powerful thing. This is the best thing about C++, right? It really is. So this, what we call scope-based lifetimes, deterministic destruction, RAII, has a lot of different names. This is really, really powerful. And I hope over the coming few weeks I will be able to persuade you that this is brilliant and this is the very best thing about C++. Why do I think like that? Well, I can't really explain it in 2 minutes, right? This is what the next few weeks are going to be about. So, we've had lots of questions, but if there are any others about Hello World, now would be a good time to yell at me. Or, politely ask.
Sorry, why on the console we see 0, but in the string we have put on console only hello world?
Okay, so that 0 is that's one box telling you the return value of the program.
Okay.
So that's actually part of one box, not the program.
Okay, not in the program.
Yeah. So it's telling you the return value. So if you change it to something else, if you change it to 23, you should see 23 under there. Yeah.
When I changed it to a negative number, it printed a different number in the return.
Did it?
Yeah.
Well, something very strange is going on with one box there. Negative numbers should be okay.
Do you need to include Iostreams in subsequent classes or sections?
So include Iostream needs to go at the top of any source file in which you use its facilities.
So it is not directly, if you call a subroutine from somewhere else, it doesn't necessarily cascade down. You can't put it in your top of your program.
Yeah, you effectively can, because you can put it in a header file, and then anything that transitively includes that header file will include.
Okay, so if you include the main in the, as you go down, then you need to put it in one. That makes sense. Am I not explaining it very well, am I?
I think I know what you're getting at, but we're going to go, trying to sort of keep it very high level. So we're going to go into a lot more about the compilation model and exactly how headers and includes work. And hopefully things will become more clear. Yeah?
So, what happens if we don't put spaces before writing STD, Cout or return 0? So if we start from the...
If you
Sorry,
delete all the spaces from your program.
The spaces. Why we did spaces before writing?
The tab in front of the lines.
Indentation.
Oh, just to make it look pretty.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no, so it's not like Python, there's no, white space is generally not significant. All you need is like one white space character to separate names, but that could be, it can be a space, it can be a tab, it can be a new line, any what are called white space characters. So there's the tab is not important. So Python gets very cross if you mix tabs and spaces. C++ doesn't care. I get cross if people mix tabs and spaces, but the compiler doesn't care. Okay. Whew. Shall we move on? We're just about halfway through. We're going well. Let's talk about types. Does everyone know what a type is in a programming context? No. So this is a very sort of broad brush definition. A type is a way of giving a meaning to some data. So computers, they work with bits and bytes and ones and zeros. And a type is a way of giving a meaning to those ones and zeros. So they help us with programming. They define the operations, they define the meaning of that bit of data. They define the operations we can perform on that bit of data. I'm waiting for somebody to ask me a question. Is that an acceptable definition? I mean, a lot of you put your hands up to say that you were using other programming languages at the moment. Almost all of them have some notion of type. Right, so you're probably familiar with this concept. Data types, yeah, exactly. The type of some data. So you could have an integer. You say this bit of data is an int. Or this bit of data is a floating point number. Or this piece of data is a string. Or this is an array of my own data type. So it tells us what this bit of data represents and how we can use it. So for example, it's okay to multiply two numbers together. Right? That's a fine operation on two ints or two floats or whatever you have. It's meaningful to multiply those. It's not meaningful to multiply two strings. What does hello times world mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? We don't have a meaning, there's no meaningful operation. And types, the type system is a way of organizing your program. How shall I put this? Organizing your program so that you can only do sensible things with your data, so that you can understand what your data means.
So in your two strings, I appreciate that you can't multiply, divide or subtract, but in C++, can you add two strings?
You can, and that concatenates them, yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's why I specifically went for the example of multiply there. You saw through my cunning ruse. So C++ comes with many types built into the language. These are the ones that, again, if you've done any or done much programming in something like Java or C#, you're going to have come across ints and floats and doubles and bools and cars and I can't even remember the rest. There are quite a few. The standard library has lots more. So for example, it has this thing, Std string, standard string, which defines a string class. A lot of languages have string as a built-in type. C++ doesn't, because it gives you the facilities to build this for yourself. It doesn't need to be a built-in type. It can be a type defined in the standard library. Std Vector is another one. It's an array that you can add things to, and it grows, and you can see how big it is and remove things from it and sort it and all sorts of things. So again, this is commonly called an array or array list, or every programming language has some version of this. So the C++ version is called Standard Vector.
So the fundamental types are, you don't need to refer to them using the standard names?
No. That's why they're in blue, because these are keywords in the language. They're built into the language.
I was confused about that one.
Yeah.
Refer to the strings as...
So these are the types from which all the other data types are built.
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay, so there's a character type. And a string is basically a growable array of characters.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Was there a hand up at the back? Oh. Go with Laurent first.
What about the overflow? If you run your overflow in the limits of your files?
Yeah, so these fundamental types do come with certain rules about how you can use them, and in particular for ints. If you multiply two ints and the result is too big to fit in an int, if you multiply 2 billion by 2 billion, then you get a result that's too big, and that can be bad. So is that what you were?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there isn't, unfortunately. No. So an int on almost any system you care about will be 32 bits. So you don't want to automatically grow that to a bigger type, because this is C++ and we really care about performance. So what it'll do is, well, technically it's what the standard calls undefined behavior. Yeah, and in practical terms, what it'll do is it'll actually roll round. So the maximum possible value for an int is about 4 billion. So you've got 32 bits of data. Sorry, no, plus or minus 2 billion, because it's a signed value. So it'll just wrap round to the negative in practical terms, but you shouldn't do it.
Do you define your standard vectors with ints, floats, etc., etc.?
Yes, yeah, and we'll. You can.
They're not predetermined.
No, this is what's called a template type, but that's so you can have a standard vector of ints or of bools or of whatever you like, and we'll talk an awful lot more about standard vector. We're going to use it for everything. So C++ is what's called a statically typed programming language. This is as opposed to dynamically typed programming language. So something like JavaScript is dynamically typed. Python as well, if you just type a name, it doesn't know what type it is until you assign something to it. C++ is a statically typed language. Every variable has its type determined when the program is compiled. Okay, so Again, this is the same thing in Java or in C# or Rust or Swift or C or any of these C-like languages. It's statically typed. It does have type inference, but it's always statically typed. And this means that C++ offers what's called type safety. So we define the rules for a particular type. We say the variable has this type, and that defines the rules, what we can do with this variable. It offers what's called type safety. So if you try and do something that's not allowed with a particular variable, your program will not compile. It allows us to catch potential errors at compile time. So again, I'm picking on Python. I love Python, but it's an easy target for this. I'm sure you've, yeah.
I was going to say, it's also known as a strictly typed language, right? Strict typing. Yeah. So, as a separate example, in C++, you can't make an int suddenly become a string. There are ways to convert it, you must explicitly do it. To contrast that, I don't know if there's any PHP developers in the room, but if there are, I'm picking on you. You can get a handle to a database in PHP, so say you use MySQL, and then you can just pass that to a function as if it's a number. It's obviously not, that's an internal value, but you can just fling that around. It's got some nice features, like you can make string 5 be the number 5, but you can also do silly things with that. So the idea of strict typing is you write less bugs.
JavaScript is also infamous for that. With,
also JavaScript, yeah.
That famous what? So I'm sure anybody who does JavaScript will have seen that one.
So how do you type inference with C++? Is that the auto keyword?
Yes. Yeah. And that will be next week.
Okay.
Anyway, just to let you know, I read a scientific paper. Statically typed programming languages save you from 2 to 3% of a bug.
2 to 3%?
I read 20 to 30.
Yeah, compared to what expected.
I read 20 to 30.
Well, then I've wasted my life, haven't I? If I'm still getting 97% of the bugs.
Maybe there is some problem in the methodology because of people using statically typed programming languages maybe are more experienced. It's not the same kind of development.
Maybe. But yes, if you've written any non-trivial amount of Python, you'll have had a situation where your program's running and suddenly you're expecting a string, but you got none, and you threw an exception or otherwise didn't behave the way you liked. C++ can catch that before your program, as your program compiles. It will say, you can't do this, this is an error. There are various ways that we can get around the type safety rules, using things called casts. It's better not to. Don't. If you're trying to get around the rules, then it's a good sign that you're doing something wrong. Very occasionally it's necessary, but you should. It's a sort of warning sign, or code smell as they call it, if you're doing these things. A void star is another way around it. If you've used C, you'll have used void star a lot. We can avoid that in C++ in various ways as well. So that was our rapid fire. What were we there, about 10 minutes or something, talking about types. Don't worry, we're going to go into this in a lot more depth next week. I just wanted to tell you what a type was so that you could understand the next bit. Any questions on our rapid fire freeze?
Is there a website, a reference website for the types?
In C++? Yes, so I've got a whole page of references at the end that will tell you all the built-in types. Oh, yes.
Sorry, I didn't get the difference between statistical and dynamic type.
Static.
Static.
Yeah, so in a dynamically typed language, the types are determined when the program runs. So in Python, for example, you can have a variable called A, and you can assign a string to it, or a number, or something. Whereas in C++, you have to say, this thing A is a string. And once you've declared that it's a string, it can never be anything else. It can't change types.
While in the other case, I can change the type?
Yeah.
While I run?
Python's a bad example with that. But
all this is inside main. I declare my variable?
No. So you will write programs with hundreds of functions sometimes. So these are the general rules.
Fundamental rules.
Fundamental rules, yes. So at the moment we've only declared one function, but we'll see, in fact, the very next section, how to write more functions, how to get functions to call other functions. Yeah.
My question is, in JavaScript, basically you can, you have a variable, you can assign to a number, and then you can rename the, you can assign again a variable with a string, for example.
Yes.
This is not possible in C++, right?
That's correct.
So basically, the only way that we can just maybe turn the number in a string to a method. That's it.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So if you want to, if you've got the number 4 and you want a string that contains a 4, then there's actually a function called standard toString that does that for you, and it returns you a new string. It doesn't turn the 4 into a string. Doesn't change the meaning of 4. 4 has a type int. What it does is it returns you a new variable that's a string.
It's a new variable.
Yes.
So you'd have to store it. If you wanted to store it to use it, you'd have to declare a string, standard string
variable
when you bring it back from that function, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
You can't put it back in the thing that you put in.
Just to be sure I understood correctly. I mean, it seems to me like we cannot declare a lot. Because like she said, in JavaScript we can just change it. But here, if we want 5 to like turn from string to number, we have to declare another 1, if it makes sense.
Yes. Although.
Isn't it a waste of like time and
No, there are ways that you can write what are called conversion functions. That do this for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry, they thought of that.
Yeah, I was like, what's the...
Yeah. Right, so I've been talking for quite a while. Shall we take a break for a couple of minutes? Anybody who wants to go to the bar or go to the loo or whatever you want to do. We'll just have 5 minutes and then we'll... Oh, you won't have to listen to me rant, so that'll be nice. So we can be back in about 5 minutes.
So I'm getting a message for this. Our screen resolution is not optimal.
Yes, because the upload speed. Nice idea about the break. I think it's particularly for beginners is a good approach. Tom, I'm in touch with the people of WeWork, which offer a place to my meetup. I'm in touch with the people of WeWork. They offer me a place like once a month for my meetup. Can I ask you also for you if you have something for C++ London Uni?
Whereabouts is the WeWork? WeWork is not far from here. It's somewhere.
They have a few places in London. One is closer.
Yeah, I remember one is fairly close. I came across them. I mean,
or I can put in touch with the rep.
Yeah, I mean, ask what they have to offer. Yeah? Because we want to be like an independent place. Because we've been offered a place in we've been offered like a place in within one tech company, and we don't want to go there because they might start putting a pressure on us. We want you to teach this, not this, and this is more open space. Yeah, it's like we won't have that kind of influence.
Okay.
Yeah, so WeWork is similar space, so it might be.
WeWork didn't ask for me anything, so
yeah. But that's what I mean. It's, they're not, the place we've been offered. Very nice, but it's run by one business, and they got C++ developers. They might say, we want you to teach this kind of thing.
It's fine. I think we're a bit cool. Should I specify that we want taxatively Tuesday or there is flexibility?
Tuesday, only Tuesday.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I will get in touch and let you know if I get something.
Thank you. Really amazing. Thanks.
Well, I need to give something back.
Program, so you can start to this particular case, website, they have something and the console is something that was created years and years ago. So in 2018,
thanks to your help on Slack earlier, I wasn't sure if I was going to get in on the board. I missed the link.
Oh, you were lucky then.
Yeah, I'm lucky. Well, I've got it here, skills, but I don't actually do that.
The trouble is that it's not on the class. I would love to have like a monster. Yeah, but the GDPR and you know the business legal priorities, time, how much they can do.
And then find money, go back to return. Let's do the opposite as well.
Come back next
I
week.
write down
Week after
something.
that. It's very simple. It's not basic thing. What I advise to do is this course, yes, it's not going to be replacement for other resources. So, Kate Gregory, for example, she's doing amazing courses online, but she doesn't have much of the exercises. So it's a good idea to go to her site and follow her courses, read the book and so on. The Romans was not built in a day. The same this kind of knowledge was not built up. This gives you like collaboration with other people. It motivates, you cover standard things, but those places like help you. So keep doing it. Don't worry. Look, sometimes I'm listening to very advanced talks and so on, and I'm like, then some of the information sticks somewhere. Like you know, I was very notation nervous, but because I couldn't help myself, and I pulled one for some reason. Like when you have return 0, yeah, there's a discussion that 0 actually is coming from the very past, probably from the C. It's not actually treated as int, it's as octo number. But octo and int is actually the same representation. Yeah, but when you return from the main, you have int main. Actually, it says I'm returning int, but actually it's not getting int. It's getting octo. It's a trick I read somewhere on the CPP class, and they were talking about that. So that was quite interesting. It's a detail, but stuff like that is taken here. So even if you don't understand everything, don't worry. Yeah? Definitely helps. But actually, it's quite fun. We had like a well, today we will be doing some code review for me and a couple of people first edition, and it's quite fun. Like you have a blank space, nothing, white page, and when you finish, you have something that works, that does something. Yeah. That was amazing. So you get some water.
A couple of minutes.
When you're ready to start, Tristan, I'll just grab some water and we can start if you want.
I just said 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
2 minutes! 2 minutes! 2 minutes!
You having another donut? Been in it.
Yes.
Okay. Oh no, I thought
How close are you to starting? 1 minute, 2 minutes?
Yeah, no, I don't actually write my curriculum. It's my work on top of that.
Yeah, such a cool space.
Yeah,
The bar's pretty nice as well.
they've got quite a few sponsors. They do this. I think they've got like IBM and sponsorship.
They rent it out.
They get sponsorship as well. They got like IBM and who else? If you look at when you get back up, you look at that massive core.
Yeah, and they use it as a place to like run seminars. So if you've got some like the chap next door, the very high profile, like well-known teachers, and companies will send their programmers, and it's like I don't know, £800 a day or something, and quite a bit of that will go to this space as hosting. I'm not quite at that level yet. That's why you get it for free.
You like the job.
So you're not going to find that now? Is that like 10 years of C++ or?
It's a little bit more than that now, but yeah. Yeah. Okay, guys, we can take our seats.
Quick reminder. I said this to some people at the beginning, but not everybody were here. So I'll just repeat. I'm circulating a page of paper. Please put your name clearly so I can retype it. I put these names on our blog. So if you later decide to go for, I don't know, change a job, go for promotion, and say I've been, learning C++, because there is no like really official way. There isn't like city universities doing short courses and so on. But as such, there is no certification for C++. We're trying to influence that part of the market and give you a hand. So a way to help you. So if you put your name, you'll be included. So then you go and you say to your boss, I was actually learning C++. I got the certification at the end. Yes, because we will give option to you to do the certification. And as well, you can check, which classes I attended, and so I know the stuff. So if you want to be included, put your name in. And I'm passing back to Tristan. So the list is here.
Also, it's really good for us if we can try to attract sponsors. If we can say, look, hey, we had X number of people here, then yes. Right. Now we've all had a bit of a break. Let's talk about functions. So C++ is an imperative programming language. It's composed. A C++ program is a list of instructions. It begins at the beginning of main, sort of, and ends when you leave main, sort of. Yeah. It's just the only reason I do that is because there are people watching this online who are going to be really pedantic and go, well, that's not actually true because you can do this thing. To all intents and purposes, it begins at the beginning of main, it ends when we leave main. And in between there, we give it a list of instructions to execute. Okay? But you don't want to write 1,000,000 lines in your main function. That would be really silly. So what we do is we break our programs up into functions. A function is a self-contained piece of reusable code. All right. Again, anybody who's done any sort of programming, this will be a familiar idea. So we've seen one function already. It was called main. Main, as I said, was a bit special. Oh, yes. Now, again, this is for the pedantic people who are watching on video. There are two kinds of function in C++. We have member functions, which belong to classes, and we have non-member functions, also called free functions. Today we're talking about non-member functions. So main is a non-member function. It doesn't belong to a class. Member functions are also called methods sometimes, particularly if you've done Java or C#, whatever they call them, methods, Python. C++ has those as well. We're not going to talk about those today. We're going to talk a lot about classes in the future, and we'll talk about member functions then. So today we're talking about these normal non-member functions, free functions.
Did you say main is a non-member?
That's correct. It doesn't belong to a class. It's not part of a class. I can hear a lot of typing. I feel like I'm going too quick. I feel bad for the people who are taking notes and trying to keep up with me. As I say, all these slides will be available.
By end of the week, usually I'll try to put them.
As soon as Lauren reminds me. Because the thing is, I always mean to do it when I go home, but we go to the pub afterwards, and then I get home about midnight and forget.
Too much beer.
Yeah.
No such thing.
Okay. This looks scary, but don't worry, I'll go through it. This is how we write a function. So we start with a return type. So for main, we said int, or it could be float, or it could be standard string, or it could be this special type called void. We'll talk about in a second. So we start off, we say, what type of data does this function return? And then we write the function name, and then we write these round brackets. So not the curly brackets, round brackets this time. And in there we write what are called the function parameters, the things we pass to the function. And we can have as many of those as we like. We can have 0, so main. When we had our main example, that took no parameters. This bit was empty. But we can have as many parameters as we like. And the way we write them is we declare their type, and we give them a name. Yeah?
Can you have more than one type for each one?
All your parameters can have different types.
So you can have more than one. So when you declare your type at the beginning, you can declare multiple types.
Yeah, so you could have an int called I, and a float called f, and a bool called b. Yeah. So every C++ function returns 0 or 1 values. So it's n number of things in, as many as you like in, but 1 or 0 return values. So again, this is Java, C#, they inherited these rules. So that should be familiar. You know, the style of the function declaration is exactly the same as you get in Java. So if the function doesn't return a value, then where this return type is, we write the word void. Void is a special keyword that means no type.
No type. So it's possible that it doesn't have a type. You don't have
there. Right, so I'm using weasel words here. It means nothing. It means nil. It means
0.
It doesn't mean 0 because 0 is an int. That's the word I was trying to avoid. It means this function does not return anything.
Can a function return another function?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it can.
Point.
Or reference. Point or
Or
reference.
lambda. Yes, it can. But that's kind of advanced. So I can tell you now, we're not going to be covering that in the next 12 weeks. We might do it or we probably will do it in the advanced course. You can return another function from a function, and that gets you into doing fun things with functional programming. So if you like Haskell, well, firstly, you're a weirdo, but secondly, you can... Sorry, I just said that live on the internet, didn't I? I'm gonna be in trouble now. No, Haskell's wonderful. People who like Haskell are wonderful. Peace and love.
Sounds like Husky.
Yes, so you can return functions from functions, have higher order functions, all those sorts of things. Yes. So to give you an example of a real life function that isn't main. Slightly boring one, but here we've defined a function called add that takes two parameters we've called a and b, both of which have type int. And the return type of this function is also an int. And then within the body of the function, we just, very simply in this case, we're returning the value of a plus b. So a plus b does exactly what you think it does. It adds the two ints together. And the return value, return this thing, gives you the function its return value. So whichever piece of code called this function, who ran this function, will get the result of a plus b.
Add is just a label, right? That could be anything.
You can call it whatever you like. The only restriction is it has to begin with a letter. It can't begin with a number, but you can put numbers anywhere except at the beginning.
Or underscore.
In some circumstances, you can begin with an underscore, but it's best avoided.
Not underscore in a capital letter.
Yeah. Or underscore in lowercase letter in the global namespace. Yeah. Yes. Oh, well, the magic disappearing function. I don't know, something funny's gone on with my slides there, but that's what I just said. So, to invoke a function, to run a function, to call a function, what we do is we repeat its name, we give it a pair of brackets, and then we pass the arguments to that function. So add was expecting two ints. So here we've called the function add, and we passed two ints, 3 and 4. So now what we've done, we've got cout, and we want to pass this thing to our output stream. So this is calling the function 3, 4, and it's going to pass the result of this, and this prints, hopefully prints 7. Yeah.
So
You're going to ask me a really difficult question, aren't you?
you know the /n?
Yeah.
Is it going into the add 3, 4?
Okay, so this is what's quite clever about these output stream things. It's what it does is it works from left to right. So it takes this and it says, okay, move that into there, stream this into this thing, and then it looks further down the chain and it says, okay, we'll stream that into that. Now, because you've already done our advanced course, I will tell you that what this operator overload returns a reference, an L-value reference to the O stream itself. And that's how you can chain the operators. Everybody else will understand what that meant in a few weeks' time. So in C++, a function must be declared before it can be called. So C++ inherited really this from C. Actually, no, that's not true. C did it later than C++, but still, you must declare a function before you can call it. So if you think about the way you organize a source, organize your source code, literally in the order you write it in your source file, you have to have a declaration above where you use that function. Now, a declaration doesn't have to be a definition. Oh, gone back too far. So if we look at this, if I just wrote int add, and then this bit, and then if I put a semicolon there, and didn't have this curly brace bit, that would be a function declaration. And what you're saying with a declaration is, this function exists, and these are the parameters it takes, and this is its return type. Now, if you don't put the semicolon and you instead put this body, the block here, then you're telling the compiler, then you're saying, okay, this function exists, and this is what it actually does. So when we were talking about the hash includes, what that does is it includes a whole load of declarations. It puts a whole load of declarations in your source file. Where did I get to? So we need to physically write a declaration of this add function before we put it down here, before we use it. Okay, so this is pretty archaic. I've got to be honest. If you've used pretty much any other language, it doesn't actually require you to write your functions in the order that you. It's a bit annoying, but it's something that you get used to pretty quickly. Because if you do it later, the compiler will say, "Hang on, what's this add thing? I don't understand. I haven't seen what add means." So before it sees add, you have to tell it what add means. You have to tell it that add is a function that takes 2 ints and returns an int. Yeah.
If you use a float for b when you run a function, would it lead to an error?
No, what you'll get is the float will get truncated to an int.
Can you say a few words about rounding errors in floats?
I prefer not to get into that in this class. Ask me in the pub afterwards. Okay, so everyone's happy with what functions are, how you declare a function, how you define a function, how you call a function. Yeah? Reasonably. Excellent. Prove it. So hopefully you've all still got one box open, you've still got this hello world that you wrote earlier. So what I want you to do is to write a function. Void hello CPP London Uni. So one of the people who hasn't been here before, tell me, what does this function return? Nothing. Excellent. What parameters does it take? None. Yes. Excellent. How long have I got?
Can I ask a naive question there?
Absolutely can.
If it returns a null value,
Yeah.
why do you wish to have it?
Because it can be very useful to break your code up into individual little bits. So in this case, it's just going to be one line function, so it's not really worth having a function. But if you had, 20 lines of code that were kind of self-contained, that just did one thing, you'd move them out into their own individual function. And then when somebody was reading the main, they would see, say hello, CPP London U, or whatever it is, whatever you call your function. And they'd be able to sort of get what that code did without having to look through the entire definition of it. It's a way of breaking it up into sort of logical pieces. Yeah.
If anybody needs help, standard.
Okay, so we're going to need two functions this time. So you're still going to need a main function because every C++ program needs a main function. Yeah. Okay. So we need to write a new function. No, it has to go outside main function. Oh, okay. So one thing that a couple of people have just said is, where do I write this main function? Where do I write my hello CPP London Uni function? Do I put it inside main? No. In C++, you can't define one function inside another function, so it has to be outside of the main function. I just told you another little lie there, but sorry.
So it's after the return syntax, and the
No, it's outside. So you've got your int main, and then you've got some curly brackets. So it's outside of that. Yep, and then you need to write the body of that function. And then it was okay, so the body of the function is right. So the body of the main function.
Yeah. So you've got not inside main. You should go.
Now when you run this, it will execute the instructions.
See how this is how main is today.
You see that you didn't get any
Put a white space. So that's later. So you see how main is today.
Yeah. I need to record anything.
Yeah, so the idea is this is all parameters and the curly braces start parameters.
No, it doesn't. That's all this. So there is nothing like.
Probably only the right alt, not the left alt.
You don't want semicolon. Instead, you want to do a body. So you don't want it to return. You don't want it to just print it like a hello world. Earlier we did std see out hello world.
Oh yeah,
It's the same thing, but different outputs.
This is definition of it's a case inside
Could be what for the purposes of this, we want to cross.
justice.
Okay, so we've got int main. So you say this is the specification of well, we've got nothing, so it's just
so that's the decoration.
So what you need to do is write down nothing.
So you can do a definition and a decoration in one go. See how many type, name of it, parameters, and that's bloody great. Yeah.
And then I can
So now we've got
this slide 10 is a valid syntax that is valid, but it doesn't serve a purpose. Because that's nothing on. So when the provider looks at your code, it evaluates it in order. So the reason why we're defining it up here
this STD files extracted from the flash, and then that will go with it.
Oh, okay.
Rows inside here. Why is it just a copy?
Now
Because it's
it will just print out all the hell.
I don't need this.
You should do it twice.
Yeah.
There we go.
So apparently, I'll copy and paste that into the 3 columns.
Yeah.
No, I expected to get an error.
Alice says 7.
Thank you very much.
You need to declare
Hello.
outside.
Did you manage to
I was wondering if anybody could spot that from what I've already
In the main menu.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay, so what's it say?
Go ahead.
So it's the I remember
Because that was, I don't see what you've done.
you wanted to run this code without using CE, you would say using something.
Using namespace as namespace. But it's a good practice if you just get used to it. Yeah, because there are lots of namespaces, and
No, it's just
basically the whole policy must be expressed explicitly. Very precise. So if you say using STD colon CL, you basically indicate that I that standard and just declaring it. So basically some other CL standard. So then there's no confusion. Yeah. It's actually running on your Mac. What I mentioned by more experienced developers, way more technical developers than I am. That's
you can be lazy.
Lots of people are lazy by default, but there are places where so they need to be lazy, and there are places where actually they will take you back hard. So at the beginning is the you work hard, and then when you very experienced like this, and then you know where you can be lazy.
So this is saying if you want to run this, then you must be willing to return files.
If you change it from void
We're trying to use
So if you want
okay, so this refers to okay, so when we later on, we can tell you if you wanted to, you could have just
Basically, what you want to do is that's what you want to get.
Yeah, and then right at the end.
So, LCPP one unique is a function.
So now you can tell it what's going on.
Now I want this, for instance, so now we write STD, see out, blah 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 blah, that. And then afterwards I've got to say, oh, so this is like a header,
yeah.
And then within the main, I put the information.
No, you put that's the header, but you put the information outside.
So, oh, yeah. So the information outside of this, the block.
No, you got
Obviously, so I create one of boxes. And then I would say, see out. This console out.
No, it's not like it's never real.
You know, I close at the end.
Yeah.
Not personally. No. I know someone who does it for a living. Yes. Well, as far as I know, and this is not my field of expertise, as far as I know, they're often done in Python, but the sort of underlying implementation is C++. So because they need the high performance, because you're dealing with large data sets, and you really want they'll write the actual implementations in C++. Yeah, you're really going beyond my sort of knowledge to create. Yeah, we did have a go with machine learning stuff. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely. I reckon 6 months. At least you can be productive in 6 months. You won't know everything about language. I would say about 10,000 hours thing, but 6 months you can certainly
I'm telling people about just separate rooms, and you store the data there, and you don't need to necessarily get the data back.
Self-contained operation, right?
Yeah,
that's the concept on it. It's the function's going to do something,
and it stays there.
Okay, so Tom's saying people are bothered by void. Is this true? Are people bothered by void? People dislike void.
It just felt like a jump. You're doing each strings and then examples something different. It just I mean, it just felt like a jump.
Well, it was the intention of the example was to show you something different.
Sure, yeah.
Right? So a function can return one value, or it can return no values. And if it returns no values, we say it's got type void. That doesn't mean that the function doesn't do anything, because within the curly braces, you can execute any sort of code that you like, including printing something out. Okay, it just means that this function doesn't have a meaningful return value. It's
self-contained.
It's self-contained, absolutely. So, how else to put it?
Okay,
So
how I explain to some people they found useful. Think of rooms. Yes, functions are rooms in a building. You could have one massive room which holds everything.
your toilet, your bathroom, your kitchen, and so on. But that's not very convenient. Yes, people like to split the stuff. This is my bedroom, I sleep there. Yes, I don't get shower there or something else. I go to the kitchen, make my food. Same with the function. We want to divide the code so the very logical things are sit in closed compartments. Now, if I have, let's say, a function that doesn't have a return type, let's say I want to send my groceries to the fridge. I don't need somebody, come back to me. Okay, you have 50 groceries inside your fridge. I know that. I just want them inside. That's it. So as simple as that. There will be something in that function, and at some point I might dig in and take something from there. But that's, Tristan will explain probably way better than I at some point. So just think, we are trying to compartmentalize things so they are not messing. One of the reasons as well, if you have a bug in your code, let's say now we're talking about 20 lines of code, which is fairly easy to go through. But if you have 50,000 lines of code, and it's somewhere there, and you don't know where the problem is, you have a trouble. With functions, you look, let's say, at, 100 lines, or 50 lines, or 20 lines, and it's way easier to find where the bug is. Sorry, that was just...
I was going to say maybe a simple example is, imagine you have a robot arm, and you want to make a function that makes the robot arm move. And you don't care about knowing how far it moved, it just moves. So you write this self-contained function with void as the return type, and you call it, and it makes the robot arm move. You don't know how far, you don't care how far. You can't tell it how far because it doesn't take any parameters. It will just move. That's a self-contained operation. It could be
void punch. Huh? Void punch.
Yeah, void punch. Yeah. Exactly, the robot arm punches, sure. Or a more realistic one for your laptop, you call a function, it creates a file, writes some random numbers into the file for whatever reason you want, and then closes the file. It doesn't return anything to you, it just does that. It just does something. So that's, hopefully explains void to you.
And you can give later parameters. Change the type. You can change from void to another type.
You could
That
give
is
it a
useful
return
to change after that, or it's only.
If you decided later on
Yeah.
that you want to change your code to return, then of course you can edit your source code and recompile it.
It's useful. It's useful.
Well, yeah, it depends on the code in question. It's
So I'm thinking of that move. So later you can say move this distance.
yeah, maybe you'd want to do that. Maybe.
It's a form of prototyping. If you've just been given a robot arm, right, and your first job is just to make it move, yeah, this is an example, like evolving your code. Your first version doesn't take any arguments, doesn't return anything, it just makes it move, and you run it and cool, it moves, so I got that code right. And then you might then evolve it a bit, so next, okay, I will make it return an int, it will tell me how many inches it moved, or whatever the unit is. Try that, cool, that worked too. Then you might say, okay, now I want to tell it how far it moved. So now it takes a parameter, and it still returns because maybe something blocked it. It needs to tell you it couldn't move that far, for example, right? So then you make it take a parameter, and then you've then gone from having a function that didn't take anything, didn't return anything, just made it move, to you could tell it how far you wanted it to move, and it would tell you how far it could actually move. Take it away.
Okay. So this was the exercise. This is my solution. That dot shouldn't be there. That's not a full stop or anything. That's just an error on the slide, so I don't know why that's there. So what I've done is I've declared this function, written the function declaration, and then I've written the body. And most people got this far. This is the instruction to print this string literal to see out. So this is a self-contained function, and the function of this function, what it does is to print. So it doesn't need to return anything, it doesn't need to take any parameters, it just prints this one thing, fixed thing. And then we get to main, and within main we're just doing one thing, we're executing this function, invoking this function, running this function, calling this function, whichever way you want to say it, we are making it do this. So now what happens is when we compile this program, or rather when we run this program, the operating system puts us here. And then we say, well, what's the next line? The next line says, do this function. So then we jump up to here, and then it does that line, it gets down to here, says, okay, fine, we're finished with this now, and it puts us here. And it says, okay, we're finished with this one now. And now we get to this magic special rule just for the main function that if we just fall off the end of it, it returns 0 to the operating system. So this is the extremely minimal solution to that problem. So if you still have return 0 down there, that's perfectly fine. It's not an error in any way. It's easier to fit on a slide if I didn't put it in. Now, I'm sure a lot of you saw this error. What if I took this chunk of code and wrote these the other way around? So main was up there, and this other function with the long name is underneath it. It's not going to work. Exactly, because it doesn't understand what this name means. So when the compiler comes to see it, it looks from the top of the file down. And before you use a name like this, you have to tell it what that means. So it needs to know that this thing, Hello CPP London Uni, is a function. Because there are other things that names can be. It could be a variable name, it could be a type name. In this case, we have to tell it that it's a function. And one of the ways of doing that is to write its full definition above where we use it. If this is all a bit, then don't worry. It will become clear. Don't worry. I did have another exercise, but we're a little bit pushed for time. Oh, sorry.
That's a good question. Does that mean in every program, main is always at the bottom then?
It tends to be, yes. Yeah. Often you'll put main in a file just by itself, and you'll have a whole load of includes above it that define the code that main calls. So I do have another exercise. Don't worry too much about it now. It'll be on the slides. It'll be good practice if anyone wants to go away and do it at home. But we've got 8 minutes left. So don't really have time to do that now. But it's just a little bit of practice using strings. And I won't show you the solution now. But there will, as I say, be on the slides. Have you just done that in about 10 seconds?
No, I didn't even get to reading it.
Okay.
I was just about to start it.
All right. Any questions before we do the last little bit? Either you're really fed up and just want to go home, or I've explained everything perfectly. I'm gonna believe it's the last one. Let's have a summary. What have we learned today? Well, first of all, this is only the little introduction to the wonderful, wonderful world of C++.
You said there is just one thing important in C++.
Sorry?
You said there is just one important thing in C++ at the beginning.
I didn't say it was important. I said it was the best thing about C++.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've gone through Hello World, broken it down, looked at what every line does. We've talked briefly about types and type safety. We've seen this include statement to include standard library headers. We've learned how to define functions, which is nice. It's really how you put together the building blocks of a program. We've been introduced to standard string. That one's not really true, but it would have been true had we done exercise 3. So next time, this is what's on the menu. It's going to be a bit more of this, but we're going to talk more about types and constants and auto. We're going to find out how to declare variables, because programs aren't very useful without variables. I had to do one of them first, functions or variables, so I went with functions. We're very briefly going to talk about value, semantics and RAII, and then we're going to have a look at some control flow statements, so if and for loops and things like that.
Dreadfully complex sounding one, but it's actually not.
Yeah. So the basic building blocks of programs, yes.
I just want to say thank you so much. It was the first session I've attended. What I'd like to ask then is, when should I be looking, or when will there be a notification as to if there will be a class next Tuesday, and if so, where and when?
Okay, that will be more towards me. Okay, so the classes are weekly.
Yeah.
So we're doing whatever we can to ensure that the class is always on Tuesday. The reason being, communicate with large number of people is very difficult, and the information goes very slowly. So we try to stick, create a const Tuesday CPP London Uni. So very few occasions we didn't have the class on Tuesday. So pretty much so far we get very good record Tuesday. Most of the time we're here, so please do log on to the Skills Matter website and book the next class. The sooner you book, the better chance you'll get a space, and they will give us a bigger room. Yeah, because they won't give us this size of room if there will be 5 people. Even if later, like the day before, let's say 50 people sign up, they might just basically turn you back. Like I had a couple of emails, people, very crossed and disappointed because they arrived at the door, and Skills Matter said, really sorry, too many people, not safe, go home. So to avoid that, do sign up on their website. On our website, I always try, as soon as we have the information, what happens, end of the week, usually Thursday or Friday, we're going together for lunch. You're very welcome, anybody is welcome to join us, and we discuss what will be on the next class. And once I got that information, assuming that there is no crazy things like I got sick or I'm traveling or something like that, I try to put as quickly as I can the blog post describing what's happening and put the next 1 or 2 classes, so that gives you an idea. For me, the most important part is to obtain your email address on our website, so I can communicate in an easy way. Yes, because if I had to fetch, 300, 400 people email addresses, that's not doable. I would just be sitting doing this, nothing else. Yes, all of us, Tristan and Oli and me, all are volunteers. We're not being paid, so we're doing some of our normal daily lives. So obviously that's an extra challenge. We question, big request to you. If you know anybody, yes, any company that would be interested in sponsoring us, get us in touch, because we sometimes need some support from outside companies, whether it's a Facebook, Google, what have you, so they can support us. Yes, so we can do what we do. Yes. It's a joy to help you, but sometimes life is there, and we need to have some big friends that will basically keep us here.
Oh, we're here next week.
We're here next week.
All right, that's really what we wanted to know. We are here next week.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we are going to Beer Shanker.
Just let me finish.
Sorry, I'm quiet.
Right. We'll wrap up in just a sec. Well, we will wrap up now. There's some homework. It's not mandatory. We won't be taking it in and marking it. In fact, we can't, because the homework for this week, nice and easy. Get yourself a copy of this book, paper copy or an ebook or whatever you like. Chapters 2 and 3 are well, you can read 1 as well. I mean, it seems like a good place to start, right? You can by all means read chapter 1, but 2 and 3 will really cover a lot of the material we did today. Goes into a lot more detail, obviously, because it's a book. And then hopefully, with what you've seen tonight and reading the book, it should all sink in. And then, we'll have a question and answer session next week to see who's read it. We won't really.
The license for Sea Lion is just 1 month.
Right. I was about to talk about this one. So, yes, we're going to be using Sea Lion just because it runs everywhere. It runs on Windows and Mac and Linux, and it's a pretty good IDE. And if we are all using the same thing, then it's easy to help people, because I don't know really. I use a Mac, so Visual Studio is a bit alien to me. but if someone's using C-Line, I can help them. You can get a trial license from JetBrains. So JetBrains is the company that make this. You give you a trial license for a month. If you continue coming to the courses, then we
will
try and sort something out.
Yeah,
we managed to do it last time for the people who attended last time to get extensions for as long as you keep coming. So we've got a lot more people this time around, so I don't want to absolutely promise that.
I think it should be easy. I spoke with Phil. Phil works for JetBrains, and I think we will be blessed with 6 months extension on the license. It's an amazing tool. So if you keep coming,
yeah,
that's the gift from JetBrains for everybody.
So yeah.
The other thing to mention is if for some reason you're unable to get a copy of the book, then it's not mandatory, of course. We do highly recommend for your own learning experience, do get it. But if for any reason you can't, then that's not a problem for us. Still come along. I think you'll still get value from our classes.
I've had a couple of people asked me, where can I look this stuff up online? These are some good resources. So isocpp.org, I was telling you about the International Standard Organization. This is their official page, and they have this getting started. Do you want me to pose with it? They have this getting started page, which I think basically tells you to buy the book we've told you to buy. So, yeah. There's this other cppreference.com. Basically, if you type any C++ query into Google, you're going to get one of two pages. You're either going to get Stack Overflow or you're going to get this. CPP reference is brilliant. It's maintained by absolute experts. The only problem is it's very, very dry. Like, it's aimed at experts. The information on there is always absolutely correct, but it's not aimed at beginners. It doesn't tell you why things are. It just says exactly what it is, and it says it in very complicated language. So by all means, look at CPP reference, but as I say, it's aimed at experts. C++.com is another reference site. It tends to be slightly more approachable, but also not quite as up-to-date as CPP reference. This one I just came across while I was Googling earlier. It seems to be very up-to-date. I haven't been able to go through all of it. I can't vouch for it completely, but it seems fine to me. This course, Kate Gregory is a very well-known C++ trainer. She does this, but a lot better, right? And she runs these courses on a site called Pluralsight. It's not free. That's the thing. It gives you a free trial, but they're paid courses. But if you don't think I'm doing a very good job, she's a professional at this. She's very, very good.
Could you get her down here for free then?
Probably not. No.
She's American, so
yeah. Well, we are working on project to invite Kate. Maybe she will join us for one of their classes.
Yeah, she's coming to the UK for a conference, but we'll see. There's also this. I don't know if anyone's on Reddit, but there's this subreddit CPP questions, which is for learners. There's also just a CPP, but that's really for discussion about the language. So if you try posting questions in there, you'll get told off by a moderator or say, go to CPP questions. We also have our own Reddit, but frankly, it's a desert at the moment. Because everyone's on Slack instead. So that's that URL again. Please do join us. There's a Learn channel in there as well, which has learners from all around the world. It has a lot of experts who can answer any questions you might have in real time. So it's a brilliant resource. And of course, there's Stack Overflow, which is really good if you have a very, very specific question and you ask it in exactly the right way that the really, really grumpy people on Stack Overflow are happy with.
And
because
it is a .NET applicator, which is more than likely.
Yeah, and it's not a duplicate. The Stack Overflow is a brilliant resource, but the people who run it, or the people who moderate it, seems to be really grumpy. And they
don't use C++.
Yeah. Sorry?
Where are they grumpy?
I don't know. They seem to be very unfriendly to beginners, is what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what. So Stack Overflow is a great resource, but if you ask what the moderators consider to be, a silly question, then you can often get lots of downvotes, and people find it very, very disheartening, understandably, because you're just trying to learn, and you get all these experts come along and go, you don't even know that, and downvote your question, which I think is really terrible. So Stack Overflow comes with this but for me, but there we are. That's. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Last thing as well, even if he does forget to upload his slides, his whole video is on our YouTube, so you could just skip through the YouTube video and, for example, see the second exercise. Or if you're really good, freeze frame that flash and just cheat. Not that I recommend it.
Communication about the slides, will they just appear on the website? Or
on the blog.
So Tom will send out an email.
Yeah, I try, after our lunch at the end of the week, yes, I try to post the blog. Yeah, so if you go to the blog section, you see class number 1. Read it through. There's all the information which I hope you find useful.
All right, and that is it, finally. So thanks, everybody, for coming. This is by far the biggest group we've ever had. It's mostly gone all right, though, so that's...
Thank you very much.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned, we do go to the pub afterwards to have a beer and relax. Everybody over 18, which I think is probably everybody, is welcome to join us. Just hang around and we'll show you the way.
It's not far.
Yeah, it's a couple of minutes walk.
Close to Liverpool Street, so staggering distance with the train.
Cool. Thanks, Christian. Do you want the book back, or Tristan? Maybe you want to.